What's up, guys? Welcome to our championship week edition of Starts and Sits. These are my starts in week 17 at QB. First off, I'm starting Baker Mayfield. He's been rolling recently and he gets a solid matchup versus Carolina. The Panthers are playing pretty solid ball over the second half of the season, but I like Mayfield to bounce back from his tough outing against the Panthers in week 13. Mayfield's been getting huge volume, and this is a must win game for the Bucks. I'm also starting Bo Nix at Cincinnati. This is a game the Broncos really need to get, and the Bengals' pass defense has struggled this season against every quarterback except DTR of the Browns. I like Nix to keep up his terrific rookie season as he tries to steer his team into the playoffs. And I'm also starting Tua Tagovailoa versus the Browns. The Browns are in pure tank mode, and the Dolphins are in a win-or-go-home situation. Tagovailoa has been playing tremendous football this year, and he should go off in Week 17. My long shot start of the week is Mason Rudolph versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Rudolph will make some huge mistakes, but he also will make big plays and push the ball down the field, which make him a better fantasy quarterback than real life quarterback. The Jags have been terrible in pass defense this season, and I like Rudolph if you're desperate to replace an injured star at quarterback this week. This week I'm sitting Justin Herbert. He gets a solid matchup versus New England, but with J.K. Dobbins potentially returning, I see the Chargers taking a more balanced time of possession approach where Herbert won't get the volume he needs to put up big numbers. I'm also sitting Drake May. He's been phenomenal this year, but he gets a very tough matchup versus the LA Chargers. I don't know if May will be able to put up huge stats in this one, and this is a game the Chargers will be going all out to win. And finally, I'm sitting Sam Darnold. Every week I've said to sit Sam Darnold. I've been wrong, so keep that in mind. But this Packers defense is rolling right now, and Green Bay is getting hot at the right time. In my championship game, I would rather trust other quarterbacks than Darnold.
Here are some running backs to start and sit for the Fantasy Football Championship. First, I like playing Jonathan Taylor against the Giants. Taylor's coming off an absurd Week 16 where he rushed for over 200 yards, and the Giants are giving up the sixth most points to fantasy running backs, so I like him to beat his projection in this game. Next, I like starting Bucky Irving against the Panthers. The Panthers are the worst run defense in the NFL, and Irving is 2 weeks removed from injury. He had 19 touches last week, and that is significant because Rashad White had been nearly evenly splitting touches with Irving for several weeks beforehand. I like Irving to be used heavily in this game, and he will produce for his fantasy managers. And next, I like starting Tyjae Spears against Jacksonville. Jacksonville gives up the second most points to opposing fantasy running backs, and Spears has put up back to back weeks over 20 fantasy points. I like him to stay hot in this one. And finally, my long shot start of the week is Tyler Algier versus the Commanders. Algier has seen 12 touches in back to back weeks. And if you're really in a bind, you could save your fantasy season with a well timed touchdown. Moving on to sits, I am sitting James Cook this week against the Jets. The Jets are a good run defense, but they struggle to stop the pass. So look for Josh Allen to be airing it out early and often, and that could negatively impact Cook. I'm also sitting Isaac Guerendo against the Lions this week. Guerendo is dealing with a hamstring injury, which will affect his agility. Combine that with the fact that the Lions are one of the best teams in the league at stopping the run, and it's a recipe for a fantasy disaster for Guerendo. And finally, I am sitting Rashad White this week. White lost a costly fumble last week, and Bucky Irving looks electric. I think his touches will be greatly reduced, and he should remain on your bench.
All right, everyone. It is week 17. It is the Fantasy Football Championships. Your starts at wide receiver, Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They talked about it last week, but Baker and him will make the push to try to get him 1,000 yards. It will take almost 200 receiving yards, but look for Baker to try to make it happen, and he should be a start. Lad McConkey of the Chargers. Look for Herbert to look his way often and get the Chargers a must win to stay in the playoff hunt, and led to eclipse 1,000 yards. Finally, Juwan Jennings of the San Francisco 49ers. He's averaging over 8 targets since week 10, and against a banged up Lions, and this game should be a shootout, so look for him to come through. Your long shot of the week is Darnell Mooney of the Atlanta Falcons. He seems to have a connection with Penix Jr., and look for him to be a big factor in a win that Atlanta needs to have to stay in the division race. Your sits Marvin Harrison Jr. His disappointing rookie campaign cannot happen soon enough. He's just way too touchdown dependent, and hopefully he does better next season for a lot of people that drafted him number one overall in Dynasty. Now, on to the Rams. It's going to be Cooper Kupp. He's a sit. The torch is clearly passed to Puka Nakua, and since week 8, Cooper has averaged less than 60 yards, so without a touchdown, he just isn't that helpful. And don't forget 2 weeks ago, the big goose egg. Finally, Debo Samuel. Yes, last week he came through for you, and a lot of people it hurt. But he's been so disappointing this year, and he didn't have to compete with Ayuk. He's going to be a sit.
All right, we are down to our fantasy champion weekend, and I got you locked and loaded with the tight end start sits. First up, we are starting TJ Hockenson of the Minnesota Vikings. They are going up against the Green Bay Packers. Listen, the guy's had 5 targets, 5 straight games. TJ Hockenson is back, ladies and gentlemen, and we are expecting big things out of him this weekend. Zach Ertz of the Washington Commanders versus the Atlanta Falcons. He's looking to rebound against a disastrous performance against the Eagles. Listen, in weeks 11, 12, and 13, he scored a touchdown in each week. Then they had the bye. Last 2 weeks struggling, but I expect Zach Ertz to make a rebound here against the Atlanta Falcons. My long shot of the week, Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints versus the Las Vegas Raiders. He was listed as questionable for the last 4 weeks, so don't let his current questionable tag kind of freak you out. He's going to play. However, he probably will split snaps with Foster Moreau, but that's why he's our long shot of the week. We believe in Juwan Johnson. We are sitting Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys at the Philadelphia Eagles. Well, for the main reason that we just said. We saw Zach Ertz get shut out last week by this defense. And listen, Jake Ferguson probably going to get the same. He's not been the same since Cooper Rush has taken over as quarterback. And I know the Commanders, well, Daniels threw 5 touchdowns last week. However, none of them went to Ertz. And we're just fading all tight ends against that Philadelphia defense. We're also sitting Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills versus the New York Jets. He had 4 receptions last week, but it was only for 15 yards. So I'm not liking the Dalton Kincaid matchup versus the New York Jets. Over to defenses, we are starting the Miami Dolphins at the Cleveland Browns. I mean, as long as Dorian Thompson-Robinson is playing quarterback for Cleveland, we're starting whatever defense they are playing. Also starting the Indianapolis Colts defense at the New York Giants. The Giants are on a 10-game losing streak. Has a lot to do with their offense, so start that Indianapolis Colts defense. My long shot of the week at defense, the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Tennessee Titans. Jacksonville, they give up lots of points. Matter of fact, the only time in recent memory that they haven't given up a lot of points was to Tennessee Titans a couple weeks ago when they gave up 6 points only. And sitting, both of the teams that were sitting are coming from the same game. The New Orleans Saints versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Listen, these 2 teams, they're tough to decide how well they're going to do. You never know what kind of offensive scheme they're going to be running, it seems like. And sometimes they're going to score points. Sometimes they're going to score no points. Who knows who's going to score? Who knows how this game's going to go? I'm staying away from this game, and I am not even touching the New Orleans Saints or the Las Vegas Raiders defenses.